Welcome to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast, where we discuss the key aspects of emotional intelligence and ways to apply it in everyday living. Now let's work together to make common sense more common. Hi, welcome back to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. I'm Jen, your host, and today we are going to talk about the trap of underestimating how much you're being watched. And I'm joined today by one of my co-hosts, Steve Friedlein. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jen.
Thanks for coming on today.
You betcha.
So I thought we could talk about being watched, being stalked. What do you think?
Yeah, that whole concept has changed a bit over the last couple of years, wouldn't you say?
You're right, because when I wrote the book back in 2013, we were mostly in office. And so people were watching us in person at the office or maybe watching our email communication and when we sent emails out. But that was it. The rest of the time we could be together.
Right. Well, I don't think we're being watched any less. I would just say that the circumstances have changed.
Yeah.
But it's still a very, very significant trap that we can fall into.
I think so too, and especially when we're remote, now our camera behavior takes on whole new meaning in video calls.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I totally agree. The interesting thing is that being watched piece is not really within our control. Okay, we can control our behavior, but not necessarily the extent to which someone is observing our behavior.
Yeah, you're right. But I think we have to be really aware of, we've been on plenty of Zoom calls, webinars where cameras are on, and what people are doing with their cameras on have been amazing to me. We've seen them in the gym. We've seen them on the beach. We've seen them in pajamas. So I think it's really important that people one, I like cameras on. Let me just, I'm on that side of this house, right? I'm on the camp of we should have cameras on. I think it helps everybody better communicate. I think it gives us that opportunity to read nonverbals on the second R of EQ, reading. I think it shows that you're present and you're paying attention, but then you have to actually be present and pay attention and not like over here doing email on the side.
Well, exactly. But I think there's also another piece of this, Jen, in terms of when do I go into the office? Am I expected to be in the office? By not appearing when I'm expected to be there, we might be underestimating the extent to which we're not being watched.
Yeah, or I think someone who's always late, chronically late, people notice that.
Exactly. The other thing I was thinking about is sometimes when a group of people get together in the office or on a call, there's a little bit of tension involved in the situation, and people either walk out of the meeting or get off the call. There are a lot of nonverbal signals that are being sent. I think of a situation where there was a standing Monday meeting with a group of people within the organization I was working for. And when they left that meeting, people would kind of take note of the atmosphere. Either you wanted to speak to those people right after the meeting, or maybe you wanted to just kind of wait a little while before you made contact.
Let them cool down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it also leads me to another thought too, Jen, and I've said this before, and I think it bears repeating. The right conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation, right? So I need to be aware of whether or not my mood is impacting the way people are observing me.
Yes. Well, and when I am either remote fully or hybrid remote, the opportunities that I have to interact with people is going to be more limited. So I always say that interaction you might have with me once a week instead of every day now has an outsized impression on your perception of me. So if I'm late to that one meeting a week, it happens to be that one meeting I'm with you, some people might perceive that I'm late to all meetings because they have nothing
Yes.
to compare it against. It's not like I see you
Right.
every day and I'm in a lot of meetings with you and I know that was a fluke. So we have to also appreciate, I think, that the perception is almost outsized or oversized in those smaller interactions when you don't have as many.
Right. When you talk about the 3 R's, Jen, recognizing and reading, for example, we're constantly reading what's going on around us, but sometimes we lose sight of the extent to which people are reading us at the same time as we're reading them. And so having an awareness of both ourselves as well as what's being observed by others in terms
Yes.
of their interpretation. Because let's face it, it's very interpretive.
It's such a good point because I think there are some, and this might be back to communication style again, where somebody who's very reserved or
Yeah.
isn't giving a lot of body language response to you, or even verbal if it's on the phone or on a non-camera Zoom, it's really hard for me to use my EQ and read you when I don't have a lot to go on. And so by giving people a little bit more, if you're not with them in person, if you're not on camera, being able to say, I'm processing what you're saying, or I hear you, keep going, I'm tracking, that gives me a little bit more confidence that we're on the same page. When I get nothing from you, I'm left to wonder, how can I use my EQ? How can I respond differently when I don't know if you're with me, if I'm going too fast, if I'm confusing you, if you like what I'm saying? I'm left a little bit in the dark, unsure how to use my EQ when you aren't giving me a lot to read.
Yeah. And we can always talk about balance when it comes to situations like this. And the opposite side of that is those people that are always the first to speak up, okay? And the observation and underestimating what people think of me if I can't hold my thoughts back for just a little bit instead of being the first one to throw all of my ideas on the table.
Well, I was thinking too about a situation I was in years ago now, but I was a keynote at an off-site event for a company. It was one of their, I don't know if it was a recognition trip, but it was a trip where they were all flying to a certain city for this event. And the night before, everybody had a dinner or, kind of a group event dinner.
Yeah.
And I happened to get in a little bit late, so I missed the dinner part, and I just went into the lounge to get a bite to eat. And a couple of them were left from the dinner. I think a group of them had gone to bed and gone up, but some of them were still there. And because I could recognize some of the people from the Zoom cameras, and I overheard this conversation between two of them, and one of them was saying, she was a little fired up, and she said, that person, she knows not to mess with me. In fact, if she comes over here right now, I will kick her blank. And I remember thinking, were they talking about other employees, or was it just a random person they got into with at the lounge? What is happening here? And it turned out, so the next day I go to the meeting, and this person is in the meeting. I didn't know her role. I found out her role, which was, I don't want to reveal too much, but it was a role that involved supporting everybody there. And I was told by someone else months later that this person was a trusted confidant, that people really trusted this person to, get advice and what have you. And I remember thinking, that's not my impression of things at all. And I'm sure the other people that heard her say that were thinking, I'm not telling this person anything, right?
Yes. It's so interesting, Jen, because I think we've all had those situations where we're at a gathering of some sorts and we're having a conversation, and all of a sudden someone walks up behind you and says, "Oh, Steve, I didn't know you were going to be here." And you do that. Okay, what did I just say?
Exactly.
What did I just communicate? Did I mention anything that may have been connected to that person? And I think just being aware, company events, It's interesting how sometimes in a more casual setting we lose sight of the fact that we are being heard. And on that same subject, when we gather together, I find myself thinking, okay, do I tend to hang out with the people I know the best? Okay,
Oh,
and exclusively have
yes.
conversation with just those people? Or since I'm being watched by other people, maybe I need to extend myself just a little bit more and have some dialogue with people that I'm not that familiar with.
Oh, that is such a good example. I see that a lot where you just go to the people you know, right? You
Yeah,
just, again, that's human nature, but people are watching to see who
yeah,
you're quote unquote hanging out with
yeah.
at company events or in the lunchroom or in the cafeteria. It's
Well,
interesting.
yeah, there was a time we called it networking,
Yeah.
back when everyone was together all the time. And I think that's still a term that's out there. But I think just being aware of the extent to which, especially if I tend to not speak out or I'm a little uncomfortable in those social situations, what are some of the things that I can do to generate some dialogue with people that I may not know all that well?
It's great. I think having a few small talk things to think of to share, even if it's just like, the local sports team and if they're playing, how they played, what the season's like, some small things,
Right.
weather,
Yeah.
anything, right?
Yeah. Jen, I kind of want to touch base a little bit on the subject of interviewing as it relates to how much we're being watched.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think when we conduct an employment interview or if we're participating in an interview as a candidate, the impression that we make, particularly on behalf of our company, is really important. And sometimes I think when we conduct those interviews, we lose sight of how much we're being watched and the extent to which it reflects on our company.
Boy, that is a good example. I mean, I've heard of companies that even watch to see how the person treats the receptionist when they walk in,
Yes.
or other employees, not really knowing who they are.
Yeah.
One last thing, thinking about work, one of the examples that I give in the book is the time which we send emails. People notice that too. And, there's a lot of times that especially leaders or executives are on the road. They might be traveling cross country, different time zones, even internationally. And so they sometimes catch up on email at odd times. But when you get an email from your boss at 3 a.m, you are kind of wondering, like, what's going on for this person? Why are they up at night
Yes.
worrying about this? And I found this really interesting ex post by, I don't know if I should say who it is, but it was actually really good. This person said, I just got an after hours email from my new CEO and noticed he added this little disclaimer. And at the bottom of the CEO's email, it says, well-being notice. Receiving this email outside normal working hours, managing work and life responsibilities is unique for everyone. I have sent this email at a time that works for me. Please respond at a time that works for you. And so I thought this is maybe one good way to offset the perception or impression that we leave people when we send crazy emails at crazy hours, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Well,
a suggestion.
yeah, it's a good suggestion, and it falls strangely enough into this category, Jen, about underestimating how much people are paying attention to what we say based on our role. And I totally get it. If I get a middle of the night, email from someone that is significant to my business life, unless they give me the caveat that you just read, I'm going to feel the need to respond immediately. And so, you talk about building relationships and establishing ground rules in terms of how we connect with each other. That kudos to that person for adding that little bit at the end to let the person know, yes, it's important, but it's not urgent to the extent that you need to respond right at this moment.
Yeah, it's a great example of EQ over ego.
Yes, yes. And I think we can probably attest to the fact that we've had those experiences where we hear from someone and it seems like it's really urgent, okay? And especially if it's a person who's in a responsible position in the organization, and we're like, oh my gosh, I got to answer right now. And we get back to them only to find out, well, maybe it wasn't that urgent. It would have been nice to know.
Yeah. The other thing I think if we should mention is the outside of work scenarios where we're being watched. And of course, I always think of social media. People are noticing what we post, when we post it, and all that, and then make a lot of assumptions about us too.
Yes, yes. I couldn't agree more.
Even my mother-in-law is aging. I'll say that. She's probably considered elderly at this point, and she's not in the best of health. So I end up taking her to a lot of doctor's appointments. And I got to tell you, there are times that I hear behind the counter conversations in doctor's offices from the staff, and I think, I don't know if they even notice we're all listening to this in the waiting room. We can all hear what's going on over there. Or in restaurants, I hear it too, where the kitchen staff or the wait staff, they're chit-chatting about stuff. And I'm thinking, gosh, I don't know. If I owned this business, I'm not sure I'd want all my customers hearing what I'm hearing right now.
Right. Well, to add on to that, sometimes you feel a little invisible. I was at a coffee shop not long ago and I was the only person in line. There was a lot of activity going on behind the counter, but no one acknowledged the fact that I was there. I was watching them, but their apparent lack of knowledge that I had a need was not on the top of their list. So it goes both ways, and I think we've been on both ends of the spectrum.
Yes, that totally reminded me when I was in school. My college job was retail, like you. We both came from retail backgrounds. You probably can relate to this. And at the time, I'm thinking of, I was in the customer service department at my company, and so we had a big counter, and we would handle like payments for people that wanted to make payments on their credit card or returns and things like that. Yeah. And I remember even then noting when we had a long line. And this is before cell phones. So no one had anything to do but sit and watch us all, stare at us, basically. And I remember noticing if I was hustling, if they could tell that I was working as quick as I could and moving and walking fast to get things done, people were so much more patient than when we were just kind of lollygagging around and talking small talk and joking and taking time in between. You see this like at the post office, right? It's like when they saw that we were hustling and we were working really hard to get everyone through as quickly as possible, people were nice as could be and super patient. But we have to know we are getting watched all the time, and people perceive things about us.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great example. And I think just knowing that there are times that I need to either pick up my pace or acknowledge someone to send a signal that I'm connecting with that person and letting them know that my ego isn't getting in the way of their need for whatever the situation is.
Yes. Well, and I know in some ways I get that it's somewhat unfair that as a senior leader, people are watching every move I make and I'm under a microscope. But I do think it comes with the job. And so being able to understand that I am being watched, I have to follow the same rules that I'm asking everyone else to follow. I need to be responsive to emails, because we talked about sending emails in the middle of the night, but how often do you send an email to someone and they don't even respond? It's just days might go by and you're thinking, did you get it? Should I send another one? Am I now nagging you? So even being responsive to messages and email is part of this. And it's just a responsibility we have to take on when we take on a leadership role, I'm afraid, even though it's kind of unfair.
Yeah. And, I think from the other perspective, I think sometimes we need to be a little more understanding when we're observing someone and we're watching their behaviors. We may not have the whole picture, and sometimes we misinterpret our observations. And I think we live in a very impatient world these days. And I think as we're observing others, we need to be conscious of giving people the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. That's why relationship building is so important. So
Yeah.
reaching out to people. All right. Well, thanks. It was a great topic today.
Yes, I totally agree.
Okay. Well, I think it's an interesting topic, Steve. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please share our show with others. For questions or future topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@jenshirkani.com. Until next time, keep using your EQ and show ego who's boss.